Hi, this is Kamera again. We're on day number 325, Acts chapter 21 through 23. 40 more days to the end of the year, to the end of the Bible. Awesome, right? So get this. Paul, after he says his farewells to the Ephesian elders, he sailed off. Him and those who were with him, he sailed off. And he visited a few different places. He went and he encouraged people as he was on his way back to Jerusalem. And I absolutely love the way he takes the time to encourage. I mean, they're believers, and he feel the need to encourage them. So he's encouraging everyone with prayer. He's taking the time to pray for them. And a lot of them feel pretty sad about him leaving, but he's praying with them, and they're showing their love back to him as well. So the local believers, though, they don't want him to go back. They don't want him to go back to Jerusalem. They're warning him not to go back to Jerusalem because there's a lot of stuff going back to Jerusalem. But how about he stops over at Philip's house? Philip is one of those disciples he called to help, or they put together to look after the food supplies and a few other responsibilities back in the day, the same along with Stephen at that time. But they stopped by Philip's house. And how about a prophet visited there as well and warned him that he's going to be bound. He takes Paul's belt, bounds himself, and he tells Paul that when he goes back to Jerusalem, he's going to be bound by Jewish leaders, and that he's going to be turned over to Gentiles. But this is the thing, though. He decided to leave. Believers are crying. They don't want Paul to go back. They don't want him to leave. They don't want him to believe in. And Paul, he feels their pain. He's hurt feel bad that they're weeping about him, crying about him going back. But Paul tells them, he says, don't worry about me. I'm okay about going back I'm ready to go back to jail. I'm about ready to go back to jail for the Lord. I'm even ready to even die for the Lord Jesus Christ. And so he says, he's already prepared for the worst for Jesus Christ. So when Paul and those who are along with him, when they get back to Jerusalem, he receives a warm welcome, from the brothers and sisters who were there. And so the next day he goes to James and the other elders of the Jerusalem church, and he tells them everything that God had done through him to the Gentiles. And so they're so happy. They're praising God at what God is doing through Paul's ministry. But then they tell Paul, the people here, the Jewish leaders here, the Jews here, they think that you are trying to turn people against the law of Moses. They're telling them, they're spinning rumors that you're telling people not to even circumcise their children, their sons. And they tell Paul, there's like, the only way what you can do to rectify this is to basically go to this purification ceremony. And once you go through that, then they got to know that you have not told anyone to turn their backs on the law. And so that's what he does. He takes their advice and he does that. But how about this? The Jews started noticing that he was there, and they create this mob. They gather this mob against Paul. They grab him and they just throwing all type of accusations at Paul. They dragged him out of the temple. They're beating him. They're beating Paul. I'm like, when they say they, I'm like, how much beating? They were about to kill Paul. So word reached the commander, the Roman commander, and he sends his soldiers and officers to run down that crowd to get Paul. So yeah, when they see the Roman, the soldiers and the guards running toward them, they stop beating Paul. Oh my God, just imagine all that anger and hate just beating down Paul. But Paul said he was ready for whatever came his way. And so the commander, he arrests Paul. And yeah, the crowd was so bad that the commander said that he was basically going to put Paul away just for his own safety. They took him to a fortress, they said. And it was so bad they had to carry Paul on their shoulders. It was so bad they had to carry Paul on their shoulders. So Paul, he requested that he be given a moment to talk to the crowd. Isn't that something? And so the commander allowed Paul to talk to the crowd. And he goes on, and as he's talking, they're noticing that he's talking in their language. And he talks to them and he tells them that he's a Jew. He was born in Tarsus, Cilicia. And he was brought up and educated in Jerusalem under the teaching of Gamaliel. And so he was carefully trained under him. He was under the Jewish customs and laws, and he was very zealous. He said he was very zealous to honor God in everything he did. And so he talked about how he persecuted Jesus' followers. He said, I was one of those who persecuted those people who claimed Jesus Christ, who preached Jesus Christ. I was there, and I upholded the death of Stephen. And he said, I was one of those. And he tells them how Jesus approached him on his way to them. He even told him he gathered the papers to persecute more Jews, and how Jesus approached him while he was on his way to Damascus, and how what Jesus had done for him, how he changed his heart. And he was okay. They actually listened to him during the entire time until he said he was here. He was teaching everyone, the Jews and everyone, about who Jesus is. But then the Lord sent him far away to preach to the Gentiles. Once he said that, crowd went wild. They went wild as soon as he mentioned that. And so, yeah. So they threatened that they wanted the commander to kill him. In fact, the commander himself was going to have him whipped. And Paul tells him, you will be breaking a law if you whip me, because I am a Roman citizen. Ha! Once he told him he was a Roman citizen, things changed. Things changed. They did not whip him. They were completely frightened. A Roman citizen? We can't whip a Roman citizen. He said, you can't do that without putting me before a jury, a trial. And so, yeah. He said he's a Roman citizen. And I like this part because the commander says, I'm a Roman citizen. I paid a lot. And Paul was like, well, I'm a Roman citizen from birth. So, yeah. Yeah, Paul. I've noticed some things about Paul that's pretty interesting. He was bold. And I noticed that when his heart is into it, that boy is so zealous that he will do whatever it takes to do what he's supposed to do. And he's working for the Lord. He is very zealous and doing and taking all kind of mess. And he is very educated. And God placed him you notice what God placed him in front of? Jews, Gentiles, everybody, kings, it doesn't matter. Low people, it doesn't matter. High people. And he speaks multiple languages. And he's very confident in what he's saying. Look at Paul's character. It's amazing. And so what this commander decided to do was have Paul to go to the Jewish council. And the crazy part about it, Paul, when he talked to them, he tells them that he's always lived before God with a clear conscience. And that's true. He said he's always lived before God with a clear conscience. And we think about how he was persecuting the Jews before he was delivered himself. He thought he was doing it in service of God. So he said he's always lived before God with a clear conscience. When he said that, Ananias, the high priest, ordered him to be slapped. And I love how Paul was so, oh my God, he was so confident. He called that high priest a hypocrite. You are a hypocrite for breaking the law, having him slapped. Go on, Paul, standing boldly in court against the man who's the decision maker. And so they told Paul he was being disrespectful because that was a high priest. Paul did not know that was a high priest. You know what Paul did? Paul humbled himself and he apologized. He said, I did not know you were a high priest. And he put the scriptures on them and let them know that it's unlawful to disrespect those people in authority. He wasn't too bold. He was wrong. He was wrong. He knew the law, and he respected the law. Isn't that something? And he humbled himself. Even though that man was still wrong, he humbled himself. Gotta appreciate that. I gotta appreciate that. So Paul tells them that he was a Pharisee. Some of you didn't know, guys. Paul was a Pharisee. And then he talks about, this is the thing about Paul. Remember, he's educated, right? He noticed that the council consisted of Sadducees and Pharisees. And the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. He says, am I on trial because I have hope in the resurrection? Conflict right there in the council. Hello. The council became divided because of that. Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection, and they didn't believe in spirits. They didn't believe in angels, but the Pharisees do. Paul is very smart. He is very wise. You gotta love it. He didn't say, am I on trial because I preach Jesus? He said, am I on trial because I preach the resurrection? Hello! I love that. That took me so bad. So much. And so, Paul, what's so beautiful is that, first of all, the commander had to rescue Paul. He had to rescue him because of the division between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? For his own safety, he had to put him back in fortress, a protected place. And so God encourages Paul. God actually visits him and encourages him and told him to be encouraged. He tells him that he needs him to preach in Rome. He told him he was faithful. You gotta love God. And so while Paul was in this protection here under the commander, there's a conspiracy going on. These Jewish men are going to call for Paul, but they have ambush to kill him. And his nephew overhears this plot. And so he goes and tells Paul about this plot. And so Paul, gotta love him. He knows exactly what to do. Paul tells his nephew, he calls over the officer and told the officer to take him because he know he had favor with the commander. The commander wanted to do right. So the officer takes the nephew to the commander. The commander tells them about this plot. The nephew tells the commander about the plot. This commander, you talking about a protection detail, to my security detail? This boy called 200 soldiers to protect Paul, a team of horses and everything, 70. He calls all of them to protect Paul, to deliver Paul to where he had to go, to Governor Felix, so that he can get an honest trial. And when he sends Paul to Governor Felix, he sends a letter letting him know why he's sending Paul there, all the problems he's having, and he didn't find any fault with Paul. There had to be a religious dispute, and they're trying to kill him and what have you. And so now he's in the custody of Governor Felix. And you know what they do with Paul? Guess how they protect Paul? They place Paul as a prisoner in Herod's headquarters. Herod was like king. King Herod. King. Herod is a king. Herod is king. Paul is in Herod's king. This boy is. I'm thinking Herod's headquarters. Isn't it like the king's headquarters? Gone, Paul. All about God's business. It's not an easy ride, but you see how with his obedience to God, his zeal to do God's business, and the wisdom and the knowledge that he's given him, and the skill and knowledge that he's given, and all the favor he's received, God is seeing him through every part of it. Not to mean that he's not getting beaten. Yeah, he's getting beat down. Those are his obstacles. But he is confident in what he's doing. And it's a tough thing he had to do. More like a revolutionary thing. So when things first change, there's always going to be some type of obstacle and a lot of just a lot of problems, a lot of feedback, a lot of obstacles, a lot of problems. And Paul is that one. And Jesus told him that he was going to have to suffer for him, but he was in a position to do that. He called Paul out of all of those other religious leaders. Pharisees, he called Paul because Paul, it had to be because of Paul's boldness. It had to be because of his heart to please God. It had to be because of his education. It had to be because of where he was born and his knowledge and his zeal. That boy don't back down. And he is confident in who he know and who he's serving. You got to love Paul. You got to love him. Look how God is using him. I can go on and on about this. But see God through this whole thing. But see how the man of God is doing as God wants him to do, not backing down in a lot of obstacles. Yeah, guys, day number 325. That was Acts chapter 21 through 23. You have a God-filled blessed day.